first tell me about yourself. Who is Dino Foxx?
Well, I am an artist, first and foremost. I am a writer. I am also an actor, singer, burlesque performer. MCing is one of my biggest, I guess, explorations right now. It seems to be the thing that has taken off for me in the past couple of years. And so hosting burlesque shows and also the MC and co-producer of the San Antonio Burlesque Festival. I also do a regular show in Austin, which is called the Midnight Menagerie. That's a people of color cabaret show, which is really, really fun. And so yeah, I'm also a son. My relationship with my mother is explored in depth in my first book, and will hopefully be explored in a happier way in my next project that I'm currently working on. And I am a resident of King William. I've lived here off and on since I got out of high school, which is exciting. I'm an educator and a friend. I knit, I crochet. I like to consider myself a spiritual person. So yeah, that's kind of, so it's a start.
That's a lot of stuff to be. So I was gonna hit on this too. When I first looked you up, the name Dino Foxx, is that your actual name?
No, it's not. That's my artist name.
Okay, and Blue Orchid is the other one?
Foxy Blue Orchid.
Foxy
yeah.
Blue Orchid, okay.
That's my burlesque name, or my drag name.
Okay. On that, you have I noticed you have these different personas. Mm-hmm. Do you ever get lost in them? Does one speak louder than another?
No, they all play well together in my head, I think. I have noticed that other people have trouble kind of differentiating them, and I don't get upset over it necessarily. I always say if there's a wig and high heels present, then it's Foxy Blue.
Yeah.
But, if someone calls me by Dino Foxx when I'm in drag, I don't necessarily... I will casually and hopefully politely kind of correct them, but I don't necessarily, consider it a moment to go into attack mode or anything.
So you like to keep them separate?
I do, yeah. Dino Foxx is a professional name for me. It's also my pen name, what I publish under. And Foxy Blue is, I guess, the person who I get to be when I'm on stage and I'm doing something totally different. But the two meet, obviously, because the biggest part for me in regards to my performance career is that there's also a pretty intense business side to it with booking and promotion and producing, things like that. It's there's also a business side, and usually those people know me as Dino Foxx, and so when they see me on stage, it's always a welcome surprise, and people are definitely embracing of that character, but oftentimes I'll forget that it's a different character. So, because Dino Foxx kind of started off as a character as well, as an actor and a writer, so...
And it just turned into the professional one.
Yeah, and it just kind of became my name that I go by in general. So when I'm, needing to spread the word about something and contacting people, it's Dino Foxx who does that, and so... those who have known me for a long time and have seen the evolution of my performance career kind of know the difference and are fine with it. But even Ben sometimes, even my best friend sometimes forgets and calls me by one name when I'm in what they're used to, I guess is what it is. But it's all fine. It's all in here. It's all in me. So
how did you come up with the name Dino Foxx? It sounded like a crooner name when I I imagined an old crooner, so I was like, oh.
I don't know where the name the name Dino popped into my head when I was right out of high school, and I was writing a play with a group called Viva La Vulva that premiered at Jumpstart, which used to be right behind here at Halcyon in Blue Star, and I needed to create a character name, so that was what I enjoyed, and then that part just kind of stuck. And I was bartending when I was really young, and I was at the time working for Ticketmaster and had a pretty intense day job. So I wanted to, I guess, make my first attempt at keeping my professional name, then my legal name, kind of separate from my performance career. And it was when I was going to be advertised in one of the gay magazines, like for this cabaret show and this strip off that I was hosting, and it was presented to me to create a separate name if I wanted to, or which name they wanted to publish. So this is really silly, but Austin Powers was just coming out, and Foxy Cleopatra was his character, and when we went to go see the movie, her voice kind of stuck in my head, and so one night a friend of mine, my roommate at the time, we were just drinking and being silly, and I knew that Dino was going to be the first name, and then Foxy was just something that he had called me that week, just because he was like, all right, calm down, Foxy, that voice kept like creeping out. And so Foxy Dino Foxx became that, and
it just stuck.
Yeah, it just stuck. And so once I started doing these little cabaret shows at this bar called the Hideout, that just kind of became the name from there, and it just kind of grew. I don't dislike my born name. It's something that my parents call me still. My mom now knows when calling me at work to ask for Dino, as opposed to, and she actually refers to me in that way on Facebook, or when she's actually started like addressing birthday cards and things like that to Dino. So it was something she was a little upset about at the beginning, because she really took pride in the name that she gave me. But when she decided to join Facebook, she didn't want certain people to find her. So because of all of my nieces and nephews calling her Nana, her Facebook name is Nana Fox, which I think is really funny.
That's really awesome.
Yeah, she embraced it eventually. So now she's got the same last name as me.
I like that. On the poetry, let's start on that. What made you pick up a pen one day and I want to write poetry?
I don't think I did. I always journaled. That's always been something ever since I was really little. I was like the kind of kid that, like even when I was in elementary school during the summer, I'd get bored and I would pick a book off the shelf and write a book report. Like that was just something I enjoyed doing. I've always kind of written. In middle school, it became more of an outlet for me to kind of document my angst and my confusion and all of those things. So I started to definitely journal more of my thoughts, and that was definitely more stream of consciousness writing. I've always been a performer in regards to theater, so I've always been an actor, musical theater performer, and I think that my first attempt at writing was definitely more of a monologue as opposed to poetry, and then recognizing that it took form in spoken word poetry when other poets identified with that, and I was actually booked for a poetry reading, and it was based off of a monologue this person had seen me perform, and I think storytelling was more of the angle. I definitely don't necessarily follow form. I don't know a lot about the theory of poetry or the format of, how certain poets write. I just essentially allow myself to spill onto the page, and as I'm writing, I just hit enter a little sooner than I guess normally, so it kind of takes that form. But I'm not necessarily a classically educated poet. I don't really know.
I know that was something that intrigued me, that I was hoping for the poets that I had to choose from, that you would be more contemporary, more now, and because we had a lot of older poets on the list, doctors and stuff like that. I was like, I don't want that, because they're going to be the ones that want to structure right. They're going to care about all this.
Yeah.
And I was like, and it's going to take away. I want that. I want the message and the now and the heart of what they're saying instead.
Yeah,
so.
for sure. I mean, to me, a lot of what I create is definitely written as stream of consciousness. I don't necessarily sit there and set out with an intention for a poem to take a certain shape or to follow a certain rhythm. One thing that I have naturally started to do are like anchor lines, where there's a certain line that repeats itself throughout the poem. I've had people notice that, and obviously working with an editor has taught me a little bit more about the structure of my poetry, and that it did appear naturally, but it is something that in the editing process is sort of kind of cleaned up. And I work with an amazing editor, Lorenzo Herrera y Lozano, who is also the owner of Corima Press, a publishing company that I'm published through. And he's very patient and very loving and takes a very careful and thoughtful approach to editing my work, because he also enjoyed that I wasn't necessarily from academia. So I think he does his best to put it in a way that it holds its own in academia and that it can be taught and learned and presented on that level. And I'm really grateful for that, because it's not something that I know necessarily or that I even set out to do. The second book, When the Glitter Fades, was something that I wrote over 10 years ago, over the course of 10 years. So when the publishing process was actually presented to me for the first time, I think I sort of went through an emotional roller coaster with it, and it actually took us a long time to actually get the finished product out. My book was actually slated as the very first book that was going to come out from the publishing company, and I think in the end it ended up being like the fourth or fifth, and that was just because I kind of got stuck a little bit. And working with my mentors and working with friends who really care for my work, and the person, Dr. Rita Urquijo Ruiz, who wrote the foreword to When the Glitter Fades, she kind of held me hostage until I handed it over. And I think we identified that I was afraid that there was nothing after that. That once I sent it off, once it was over, that I wouldn't have any other stories, that it was over for me, that the fact that I was writing a book was done, that it was no longer a possibility for me to identify as someone who constantly is in the process of writing a book. So I was really excited. She cooked me dinner one night and she sat me down with the laptop and she's like, "You're not leaving until it satisfies you, and you hand it over to me. I will review it. I will give you some feedback, and then I now have it. So it will go to the publisher. It will be gone. You'll go through the final edits, and it will be a book." And then she honored me with a foreword that put my work into the context that I wasn't familiar with. I mean, she teaches for a university that I probably would have never gotten into had I applied, and so for her to be able to put it in this context where she recognized that the stories were important and that needed to be heard, and that there were students who get lost in these larger white universities, that their stories aren't present, and that it was important to do that. So I remember getting the foreword from her for the first time and sitting in bed with my partner reading it, and I couldn't get through it. I just kept, just sobbing like uncontrollably. And I think because another artist took the time to honor my work in that way was where the root of that passion was coming from, but that it had legs. It was finally a book. It had relevance, and the biggest thing for me that it's just I want for people like myself to not feel alone. Because I did for many years. Because when I was younger and I was reading all of these things, the stories reading about a gay man in the Castro in the 70s who was white, that wasn't my story. Reading about other gay men's experiences until I was able to actually meet other queer Chicano artists and recognize myself in their stories. It seemed that it didn't have a place. There wasn't a place for stories like mine. Because they're, like I said, they're not pretty. They're not. Some of them are. Some of them are tragic to the point to where they're pretty. And But I want to do my best to document a part of history that people want to erase, that people don't want to be present, that people don't want put in an archive or on the shelves in a library. And that's because if it means that one or two people pick it up and read it and relate to it and don't feel alone, that's all I really ever set out to do. So, I don't don't even remember what the original question was. The caffeine's kicking in.
What made you pick up the pen and write up Want to Be a Poet?
I mean, it's just storytelling. I come from a long line of storytellers. My mom, my aunts, my tios, like, it's all my family ever does is get together and tell stories. And as they're getting older, it's the same story over and over again because they forget they told the story. But that's it. You know, that's just a huge part of it. And the fact that it took the form of poetry, I guess, was a coincidence. And it was, you know, I'm also a playwright. I'm also a songwriter. I do write in other forms. But that my work sort of is packaged as poetry. It was a pretty natural transition. I think the performance poetry, I think, is a huge part of that. I was greatly inspired by slam poets, by watching Def Poetry Jam, by you know, singers like Jill Scott, who at the core of everything is a poet and will always first and foremost be a poet. She has a gifted ability to sing, but her lyrics are what is, you know, really big about her. I've always enjoyed hip hop, so that was another thing that really presented itself to me as I guess in a pop culture way, you know, that spoken word poetry was really big when we were younger, and so I feel like going to Puro Slam and kind of witnessing other poets and even taking a crack at it myself, and I later realized that I didn't care to perform for a score, and it made me really nervous, and it didn't fulfill me in the right way, and it was a weird motivation. So I think that's kind of where it went, and to me, I even always try to incorporate some kind of performance, even when I'm reading from the book. Like, you can only do so many readings at a podium with a mic, you know. So to me, I try to mix it up a little bit.
Okay, which is really lucky because I can't just transfer over to that. I tried. I was in a band in Seattle, and they stuck me since I wrote. They're like, "Oh yeah, write the lyrics," and I'm like, "Guys, like that's a different medium.
Yeah.
You know, that's like asking a sculptor to paint a picture. It's like you're doing something completely not.
Right.
So you're really lucky that it just came to you. Because I mean, I listen to music too. Love music. I read a lot of poetry, and I still couldn't do neither. So
I'm not saying I'm good at writing songs, but it's just something that
you just do it, right?
Yeah.
Where does your the inspiration come from?
I think it's interesting. Heartbreak and sex. I mean, that's really the core.
I got that a lot from
yeah.
The Glitter Fade is the one that I was.
Yeah. So it's interesting, and it's one of those things that it's funny to just, I guess, vocalize it, but usually after sex is when it hits me, and I don't know if it's like the rush of endorphins or I don't know what it is, but you know, it was good when I'm like ready to, or I'm like writing it as I'm driving home, or you know, in the shower or something. And then of course heartbreak is a huge. I'm like picking at my nail polish while I'm doing this. I think I'm really nervous. But I think, yeah, so I think obviously heartbreak was another thing. Unrequited love is always something that has fueled me through, I guess, through anger, to try to capture at least some kind of beautiful moment from it. And yeah, so those are and I think music inspires me quite a bit. I know that Adele's last album was really huge in regards to stirring emotion in me, as well as Sarah Bareilles' sophomore album. That was another one that really got me. I didn't really get so much into the more recent stuff that she wrote, but yeah. And then of course, you know, being surrounded by so many amazing artists that I can call my family and friends, witnessing their work, you know, even listening to, you know, Anel Flores, who wrote Empanada, and who's another Colima Press author, listening to her stories, Joe Jimenez, who's another San Antonio queer Chicano author, listening to his stories just spark memories that I thought, you know, haven't thought to document. And so yeah, that's if I'm being fucked or fucked over, it tends to be what brings it out of me. Yeah, I don't know.
Are there actually? Do you have like aiming more at classic, but do you have any other poets that you like look up to or inspired by? Or
Suhair Hamad is actually one of my favorite poets. She was one of the Deaf Poetry Jam poets, and there is a poem in my book called Exotic, which was pulled from a poem of the same name with a similar theme in regards to her personal story, about being exoticized, and so it took a very different form in my writing, but it was definitely a nod to her in being inspired by kind of being exoticized. And what's interesting is that, like in my poem, it was more about being a queer identified man who was exoticized by straight men, and it being something that a lot of men that I had encountered were curious by and wanted to experience it, but without anyone knowing, and sort of growing frustrated with that and wanting a little bit more for myself than that. Now I don't really care. Now it's just whatever. But when I was younger, I was so hungry for love, for wanting to be accepted and to be cared for, and so that's where a lot of that frustration came from. I would say that Lorenzo Herrera y Lozano is a huge inspiration for me. He is obviously a more modern contemporary poet, but he has been writing for 15 years and has been publishing for I think 12 of those years. And as a visionary storyteller, I really love the way that he captures emotions and moments in history, and does so with ease. Obviously, like Emilio Arenas was another poet that I really enjoy. I mean, it's interesting because a lot of the poets that I'm so in love with, they're from the last 10 years, but they're people that I call friends and that I love,
That's actually really fortunate that you can. Not a lot of people can, like Chaucer and be like, oh, I hang out with Chaucer. So that's really fortunate. Again, do you have any of all of their work? Do you have like a favorite poem that stands out for you?
It's interesting. I have some issues around saying this because I'm being recorded, but I think Loose Women by Sandra Cisneros was a huge turning point for me as a writer. Again, having issues with a more... This is really hard to say. I'm trying not to be a bitch, but who she. I don't know her. We'll say that. So, but having been around her and working around her in the community, I find it really hard to just throw that out there. It's like, that's my favorite poem, my favorite collection of poetry or whatever. But there's a lot of work from there, from that book specifically, that I enjoyed, and that was kind of the last of the work that I greatly enjoyed. Later stuff I wasn't quite so into, but that's gonna come back and bite me in the ass, and it's gonna be all your fault, man.
I'll try to keep it on the DL. What do you think makes good poetry?
Honesty. I think honesty is the biggest part of that. Whatever that means to the writer. I think that everyone has their own truth in the world, and they move through the world with that truth. Even like, say for instance, when my mother reads my book and the stories are about our family, our truths differ based on memory. So there are certain things that I have done my best to do the research and talk to her and try to get numbers and dates and things like that correct. But I also, I think memory holds a truth for individual people, and as long as that's honored, I think that allows a story to be relatable and allows for a reader to connect in a way that is really powerful. I think my editor has, because he also knows me so well, knows when I'm not being honest in my work. And sometimes the edits just stop in the first 2 lines and it just says, fuck you, this isn't true. And having to revisit it and tell it by stripping back the facade, you know, trying to be flowery with the words, and you know, it's funny because and he's always been right. I mean, every single time that's happened, it's been correct. You know, like he knows when I'm skirting an issue and not necessarily, you know, being completely honest about something. And him not even knowing what I'm talking about, he can still see that. So I think
it's really because you're so in your work, you're so honest and so just brutal about it. Just throws it out there like this is what it is. That I think it would be easy to pick up on that if it was lacking there.
Yeah, and so I think you can also see that in other people, or when someone is really. I have this thing about specifically performance poetry. Like if the presentation of a poem is more about the rhythm and the style of presentation, I'm not even listening to what the poet's saying. Do you know what I mean? And you can kind of, I don't know if you've ever been to a poetry slam or...
Once, in Seattle.
Yeah. And it's funny because there's specific categories of poets. There's, you know, but there's always like the politically driven, like angry, you know, the person who delivers poetry like this, and you know, and it's just like, it's, you know, I'm not listening because it's not who you are. Just, you know, tell me your story. That's what I care for. Yeah. So I think honesty, I mean, at the core of it, regardless of whether or not you're like even spilling your guts to the person who's reading your work, as long as you are telling some form of your truth, no one can ever tell you you're wrong. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So to me, that's what's important about work. And sometimes like rhyming and meter and, you know, all of the technical things about poetry, sometimes I don't even care about that. I just want to hear the story.
Yeah.
And so when someone can strip it down and is honest and willing to be vulnerable, I think that's what really makes good poetry.
You covered that on a question before. How do you begin writing it? What gets where does it just come from? Obviously, you said earlier that one of the things that inspires it is the sex and the emotion, heartbreak, things like that. But what makes you just like, hey, I'm gonna go home and actually do it?
I don't know. Sometimes, and this is gonna sound really weird, but sometimes the words just start repeating themselves in my head, and I don't know. It could be maybe the parting words of the person who I'm leaving. I don't know. Sometimes it just sometimes it cooks in my head for a little while.
Is it the word that cooks?
Yeah.
Do you have the word or the cadence or the image or something, or it's
usually it's just the image, and then whatever the line is that I feel drawn to, and it's sometimes I'll even like the shower tends to be another place that I think a lot. So you know, obviously I can't pick up a pen and write, but I'll start to repeat the line in my head, and then when I actually sit down, it's more about identifying for me like the theme. Okay, so this situation happened. I really enjoyed it. So what is that about? And what was it about that moment that made it powerful and memorable to you? So maybe it was the smell. Maybe that was the part that stuck out the most. So then what are the senses? So what did it sound like? What did it feel like? And then sort of explore it in that way. I have to say that some of my poems are not just about one person. So that's another thing. Some of my poems are 3 people, you know, that kind of have inspired the same kind of moment. And so taking time to dissect each of those moments and sit with them, the good, the bad, the ugly, presents how it flows. One of the things that I love the most about stream of consciousness writing is that you shut your brain down and you just let it go. You don't stop to edit. That was something that was taught to me by one of my mentors, Julie Valderrama, who was one of the creators of Viva La Vulva, this feminist performance group that I was in right out of high school. And again, she was really good at identifying when I became a performer, when I turned on this pristine, when I wasn't being honest, when I was being a character, trying to tell the story from a specific character's voice. And when I was young and stupid, it made me hate her. It made me so angry that she challenged me and was calling me a liar. But later, as an adult, I recognized how beautiful the work was when she finally broke me down and was able to pull real stories out of me. So yeah, that's kind of how it starts. And then I know many poets sit with their work a lot, and there's 4th and 5th and 6th drafts of things. I kind of don't revisit my stuff very often. It's usually in the editing stage when there's certain parts that I have to revisit and restructure. Just to be honest, the starting is easy for me. The ending is always the hardest, and I have the hardest time ending my work. And I don't know if it's because the stories aren't really finished, like they're ongoing, they're in some shape or form continuing on. But that's one of the things that I struggle with the most. It's like, and then the poem's over. You know, like I don't ever know how to end anything. So
like those presentations. You have a lot of presentations at college, and then people do it, and they're like, and that's it.
Exactly. That's
shut the computer down. That's all I had to say about that. Do you ever feel spent?
Are there any questions?
Yeah.
Do I ever feel spent?
Yeah, just
exhausted.
I know you said you were worried about it the first time whenever, like, this is all I have to say with the first book, but do you feel like you're pushing it out, or do you ever get tired of it? Like, I got nothing.
No, not really. One of the things I do struggle with, though, is I go through long stretches of time where I don't write at all.
Oh, really?
Well, social media posts and creative things in marketing and press releases and, formal announcements and things. I'm always writing in some form, but I haven't written a poem in 4 years, probably. It's been a long time.
Wow.
The poem that I think it's the poem that ends when the glitter fades was the last poem I've ever written. I've never written anything else. The technical part of creating the book was what kind of took up a lot of time for me. And then I started a new relationship with my current partner, and we create poetry daily, just in life and experiencing things. The one thing that has gotten better is that I'm not afraid that it never will. Like, now I know it will come when it's time to start telling other stories.
Yeah.
You know what? I totally lied to you. I wrote one poem waiting for my...
Oh, is it, I know I got a tip from a friend who was like, oh, if you look on their Facebook in their notes, they might have poems.
Yeah.
And I looked actually yesterday, and I was like, oh, crap, he has some stuff on here.
What? For real? I don't even know that.
Yes.
No, on December 16th, 2013, I wrote the first poem of my next book.
Wow.
Yeah, and I wrote it on my phone while waiting for my partner to get his teeth fixed, because when we were in San Francisco, he bought some silicone cock rings, and they came in this pouch, and he went to open it with his teeth, and his veneer, chipped off. So, yeah. When we came back, he was getting his new teeth put in, and I wrote a poem. And again, it was an exploration about my grandma's house. And in that, I was just really heavily thinking about going back to something that you knew as a child and how different it was as an adult. Mm-hmm. How things seem smaller, how things have faded, so that was... a huge part of it. So December, that was the last time I wrote.
Oh.
but I know what I want to write about. I know what I want to explore in this next project, and I want it to be more about documenting the happier moments, because I think my childhood was filled with plenty of them. Lots of stories that my mom has told and little lessons that she's taught me that stick with me. I want to do my best to honor the happier parts, because there were, it wasn't all darkness. That was what I was holding on to for a long time and really needed to get out of me, and that's what presented itself in this past book. But moving forward, I think that's what I want to focus on. I really want to focus on the funnier stuff, the silly things, the loving, healing, nurturing side that I experienced, and what I think made me strong enough to survive some of the stuff that we kind of went through.
So. Is there a poem that you've done that you don't like, or that you're not fond of?
Plenty.
Oh, really?
Gosh. Oh gosh, yeah. When the Glitter Fades started out as another book. It was a whole other project, and then it became a one-man show. And I workshopped a lot of the pieces that way, and then, oh my God, there must have been a good 25 poems that didn't make it into the book in the final form. Yeah, there were a lot.
Wow.
Things that I just didn't identify with anymore, because I was like 19 when I started writing this book.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? There were things that I didn't believe in anymore. Things that I was really judgmental as a kid, and when I was 19, and I was hard on myself. I didn't, a lot of things that as a 20, I guess I was 21 in the final editing stages, so a full decade had gone by, and I didn't believe a lot of those things anymore.
Do you ever think you should go back to it, though?
Well,
for people that are at that stage in their life?
I did struggle a lot with the concept of documenting a moment in time. I did. There were some things that I don't believe in that are in my book now, or things that were just slightly altered to kind of represent a little bit more. But yes, I did. We did have a lot of, my editor and I had a lot of conversations about that, because it was a documentation of a specific amount of time.
Yeah.
But after Tragic Bitches was sort of thrust. Okay, so that's another thing. So the first book, Tragic Bitches, was written around the same time. Some of the material does exist in both books.
Yeah.
But it has been my most successful connection to the publishing world, and I can't stand half the shit that I wrote in that book. It bothers me, because I feel like I'm such a different person. I feel like knowing that students in universities all over the country are reading certain things, I'm not ashamed of it necessarily, but I'm like, oh, but look at this book.
Like
try this one now.
This is what I did.
This is who I am now. So there's and it's funny, because my publisher or my editor always says, I'm sure Madonna sings Vogue and wants to shoot herself in the head. I'm sure she's tired of,
you can't do this
of hearing that song. But if you go to a Madonna concert and she doesn't sing Vogue, the entire arena is going to freak the fuck out. So even though to you you're over it, you have to, like, Exotic is one. Then there's cycles. There are times when I come back to it and I'm like, oh, this is a good poem, and then I learn a different way to read it. And another thing that's really funny, and especially when Lorenzo and I are doing performances together, he's known the work inside and out, because not only has he edited it, but he's been around me while I've been reading this poetry for 10 years. And improv is a huge thing for me as an actor, as an MC. It's just huge. It's what makes me happy. And I'll change up lines, I'll update, If I make a pop culture reference and it's completely outdated, rather than let it sit in the moment that it was, I'll update it. He's like, wait a minute, that's different. Why did you do that? Things like that. But, oh yeah, funny.
That reference is so yesterday.
Exactly. Well, and it's funny, because in Tragic Bitches, we talk about MySpace, we talk about, all of these things that completely put us back where we were when we were experiencing these things. But,
just now, people would read it and be like, what's MySpace?
Exactly. Yeah, a selfie was once called the MySpace photo.
Yeah.
That's
the ghost town of social media now.
Exactly.
Do you have a muse? Is there like a person that, because I know you said he does, a lot of your friends, is there someone that you just be around that gets you going?
No, I think I'm currently seeking a muse. And I think that person can be many people.
Yeah.
I don't know how this is going to come out. I've never really vocalized this before, but I enjoy being the muse, if that makes sense. I enjoy being one that inspires people, and photographers, other writers, directors. I enjoy that quite a bit. Stylists, makeup artists. I enjoy being the muse, and I'm certain that I've had them, but they've never been good for me. And I know that, my partner inspires me in many ways. But I think we're living the experiences that I'll later write about. Like, I truly think that's where I'm at right now. And we're in an open, at some point possibly a polyamorous relationship. So the muse is still open. It's up for grabs. People can move in and out of those roles, I think. We shall see.
Do you think in today's age, poems still have relevance?
Poems?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't see why not.
Just with the advent of social media and
I know some people whose status updates are pure poetry. And being able to get a poem out in 21 characters is a gift within itself.
Yeah.
And I think that attention spans have definitely changed. Does a 400-page book of sonnets still pull attention? Maybe not.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that. Poetry is everywhere. It's on our skin. It's in the air that we breathe. I don't see that ever going away. Will it change and take shape? Obviously, it has. It already has. It has changed.
Yeah.
It is different. Are there certain poets in the grave that would look at me and be like, why is he interviewing this person? Probably. But I don't think poetry will ever go away.
I know I worry about that as a writer of people reading nowadays.
Yeah.
So many people are not readers,
I'm one of those people. I don't read a lot. Well, I love to read poetry because of the fact that it moves quickly.
Yes.
And that it is easier to read and easier to get through and holds my attention better. I collect books regardless of whether or not I've read them all.
You read them or not.
I just think that they're precious and I love them. I have read most of what I have on my shelves, but I have a huge thing with attention span. I really do. I always have, and it's just never been. I think past the teen novel kind of age. Back then I could read a book very quickly. But I think as I got older, I got a little more distracted. So that's why poetry, plays, scripts, those are the things that I tend to embrace easily and read really quickly. So, yeah.
Would you ever write a book, an actual, a novel, or expand into different genres?
Yeah, well, I've already written a play. When Tragic Bitches was a script that the three of us wrote that was published. And then I wrote a second hip-hop opera called The Last Call for Truth.
Okay.
And I don't know what's happening behind me. So I've done the playwriting thing, I've done music, I've done poetry. I have thought about writing a novel, or even having this book with my mother's happier stories take a more narrative turn. I've thought about it. Whether or not I can accomplish that, I don't know, because there is a lot. A friend of mine, Charles Rice Gonzalez, wrote this really amazing novel, which technically was a teen novel called Chulito. And I read it on 2 plane flights on my way to and back from Boston. And it was so fun and whimsical and passionate and dark and dirty and all of the things that one experiences as a coming of age And I liked it, but whether or not I have the education to pull that off, I don't know. And now I'm actually going to start writing for Out in SA, which is the San Antonio Current's gay magazine, LGBTQIA magazine, and I will be writing in more narrative form there, and we will see how that goes. So,
best of luck on that.
Thank you.
Well, it's a different medium, so
for sure.
What's the best advice you've been given about writing?
Hide the knives and just go there.
Simple. I love it. I don't know if I should ask that already, but because I kind of hit on it. When you are writing, do you generally try to keep it secret aside from the people that are in the process, I guess? Since I know you said, they do see it, your editor.
Yeah, no, not necessarily.
You talk about it, you let people. I know I get that way whenever I do mine. I get too stupidly excited and I can't. I'm terrible at keeping secrets.
No, and there's certain people that I will be like, hey, can I read this to you, or can I send this to you? No, it's not secretive at all. I don't think I don't keep secrets very well, so I don't think.
On that, total just question I just thought of on the fly. Have you, has a poem that's been directed at somebody, has that person read it before? Like, because
totally.
Broken heart situations, like an ex or something, and it's like, this is for you, and then they read it.
Yeah, but I don't think I've ever had that kind of reaction necessarily. Yeah, no. I mean, the people that I've written the exposing, I guess, the worst, those people haven't. They
haven't read it.
No, those people haven't. I mean, to my knowledge, not that I've given it to them to be like, hey, read this. They're just no longer in my life. Maybe they have. I don't know. I mean, my mom is the only one that has read things that had interesting reactions to things because it was about our childhood and about my uncle and things like that. And but other than that, no, not really. It's out there. They can buy it if they want it.
If they want to see it, they can.
Yeah.
Obviously, I mean, you tell me by now, you are, I was going to ask if you're nervous about the reactions you'll receive. But on that, how do you take criticism?
I do get nervous, definitely. I do wonder how people are going to perceive things, or if things will change once they see it in writing. And I just have to I have to make a conscious effort to not think about it, to tell myself, that's not what this is about. This is your truth. If anyone tries to question it or combat it, that's not about you, that's about them and their reactions to things. So I do still get nervous. I try my best not to think about it. And then the second part of that was?
Criticism. How do you receive it? How do you take criticism?
I mean, I'm a Scorpio and I'm an artist, so of course I don't like criticism, but I guess it just depends. It depends on how it's presented. I think as an artist myself, as someone who enjoys teaching and educating and mentoring myself, I think when an artist's best interests are put first before the ego or someone's personal connection to the work, then obviously it comes off as being very sincere and about wanting to propel the work as opposed to being about anything else. Yeah. So if it comes from that place, and I do have people in my life that I do receive that well from, and I have no problem with it. Yeah, but I'm certain there's people out there that don't like what I do, and that's totally fine.
Totally okay with it.
Yeah, I mean,
it is what it is. It's out there. Can't take it back.
So that's what it is. I'm who I am.
Who is your biggest fan?
My biggest fan?
Yeah. Do you have a biggest fan?
I do. I do, and his name is Hector Bojorquez. I'm not sure if you looked. Oh my gosh, I lied to you again. I wrote another poem. Oh my gosh, I did a poetry music video for this poem called Lambert. It's on Vimeo. I don't know if you watched it. But he's the videographer who shot it and who has shot a lot of the video work that I've done. A Man with No Hands Productions is his video production company, and geez, I'm just like lying on the record here. But yeah, that was a project that we did earlier this year. But he is very vocally my biggest fan and has been a part. It was actually an internet hookup that turned into a lifetime friendship, and we met for sushi, and it just presented itself more as a friendship, and we went that route. And
went with it,
yeah, he's been a huge supporter of everything that I've done, and would do anything for me. So yeah, he is.
I wanted to ask about Tragic Bitches. You're a founding member, Performance Poetry Collaborative. Can you tell me what exactly that entails and what got you interested in being a part of that?
Actually, it was born completely together as the three of us sitting in a room together. We were, Adelina Anthony was in residency with Alto, the organization that actually launched my career as a writer in Austin. And one night, I don't know what was going on. I think it was before her performance. For some reason, it was just the three of us in my friend's apartment. And we were drinking wine, and we had a bunch of snacks. There was so much food. And we were just telling these random stories just about breakups and all of the crazy things we've done for love and to get attention. And Adelina, I mean, we were all just like at this point sunken into the couch, and she's like, man, we are some tragic bitches. And that was sort of where it launched, and it was more about a collaboration of the three of us putting our poetry together. We wanted to, the reason why it was an experimental performance sort of project was because Adelina and I were performers and Lorenzo wasn't. We were all poets, we all wrote, but we were the only two that were performance artists as well as writers. So we strung together these themes that our poetry sort of fell into, and Adelina and I sort of helped stage it, and it was something that we toured the West Coast with. We performed it at La Peña, at La Peña, this amazing performance space, Makla. We performed it at the LGBT Community Center in Hollywood and in Austin. And so this script just kind of took off. The part of the experiment that was really exciting was that Lorenzo went there. He pushed through many issues he had with performance and, with memorization, with, lots of things. He really pushed himself, and it was a magical experience. And then the three of us continued on as artists, and we would get together to do this piece, but it became harder and harder to remount it. So we decided, so let's publish the script. That'll be a way of putting a nice little bow on the project and ending it, putting it out there. And then every freaking university that picked it up wanted us to come and perform it.
Wow.
So it had this whole other life. It took off again.
Wow.
And we did not expect it. And we were grateful, and we did it. We toured to lots of different universities. We've been extremely blessed to have the opportunity to meet students who have read the book and are writing about the book. And it was the little project that didn't die. It just never wanted to die. It's still out there. It is still, to this day, being picked up by at least 2 universities a semester, like being taught across the country. So she has a life of her own. We don't get together to perform it anymore, but we've individually gone and spoken, but yeah.
How do you take that kind of that fame, that level of recognition?
I mean, it's
Humbling or overwhelming?
It's not. I mean, I don't think it's overwhelming. It's not, and it's. I mean, I don't really know what level of fame it is necessarily, because I mean, a lot of times, a lot of times it's a bunch. Some students don't even make a connection to it. They do it because they're in the class, and then it's over, and then they sell their books on Amazon as a used book. Yeah, I don't know that it's fame necessarily.
Well, the recognition.
The recognition is it's exciting because it provides another platform to tell stories.
Because it's different than because I mean anyone can you can be in your house, write it, throw it in the drawer, and it's done.
Yeah.
But obviously you didn't. You guys didn't. It's out there, so it doesn't.
I think it's just fun that we have the opportunity to do it. I mean, I don't. It's not like we get there and we're like mobbed. We're not like attacked by this giant group of feminist groupies or anything. But it's fun in that we get to go to these universities and talk one-on-one with these students and answer their questions and hear what they think about the stories, hear what they have to say, like what are their stories, what did it inspire them to do, with their own individual stories. I think that's the more exciting part. Getting to meet people, lots of cute boys, and going out afterwards and having dinner and talking and meeting people. One of the most amazing experiences I had was doing a residency at Wellesley College, which is still a majority women's college, while they do now have trans-identified students. I feel that experience was amazing because these are students that are, for many of them, they're struggling to pay that tuition. They're working multiple jobs on top of going to school. It's a very white, very rich university. It's a part of the Seven Sisters, these kids are sitting in classrooms with princesses from Europe. I mean, they're having a really hard time identifying themselves in anything that they're learning there. And so the opportunity to pick up our stories and to see a little bit of themselves, and then to have another queer person of color come and hang out with them. And I did a burlesque performance for them, and they were co-op, and I set the fire alarm off with my fire eating routine, and the fire department came, and they had to hide me in a room. It was awesome. I mean, it was one of the best experiences. And these students, they took care of me. They knew I was there for a week and that there was nothing to do in this town. So they bought champagne. They, bought me smoke and kept me up till all hours of the night. And, it was a fun experience. And I still to this day keep in touch with a lot of them, and I watch all of their accomplishments. I see them all getting accepted to grad school. I see them moving on. One of them who was an amazing butch identified girl who later then transitioned into my new friend Caden Avery, who is an amazing man who now lives in New York and is doing some really great things. That to me has really been the best part about it. And of course the attention on being on you, and no artist is going to say that doesn't feel awesome, but to me being able to really interact with them is the best part of it all.
Yeah, I'm getting used to that now. So with my book coming out, that was at the bar when everyone was talking about it. I told my girlfriend, hey, I don't know if I'm ready for this. This is insane. I couldn't even take people talking about it. It was just overwhelming,
For my book launch, to see that there were it was standing room only, and it was all people that I've known for some of them 15 years. I had to put my character on. I couldn't process it. I couldn't. I performed it as Foxy Blue that day because it was the only way that I could fathom. And I'm talking about people who have their own successful books who I have been following. Why the fuck are you interested in me?
It was terrifying.
It was insane, but I've come a long way from the first time that Tragic Bitches had its first university reading, where I was so insecure that I collapsed into myself, and it was horrible. It was really, really bad. But
why performance poetry?
I'm just a performer. I mean, that's who I am.
Just got that.
I can't avoid that. It's a huge part of my life, and I think things that have life on paper are exciting, and then you get to just breathe life into it in a new way every time you perform it. It's just a huge part of what I love and who I am.
Is there one message you'd say your poetry has to say?
Document your truth in any way necessary.
Is there anything your many performances, acting, singing, dancing, fire eating, have in common with poetry?
I guess that it's all. That's really cliche to say that it's poetry in motion, but I don't know. To me, it's just all art.
It's just art.
Yeah, I think that it's just all art to me.
How would you describe your work in a single word? I thought about this. I myself called it audacious. When I read it, I was like, this was audacious. It was just so very bold. That was the perfect
That was your word for my poetry?
That was my word for your poetry.
Wow.
Audacious. It was just a very upfront, this is who I am. That word sounds so glittery, you know, it's just a perfect word for it, or else it's like, that's the word that I would describe.
That.
Audacious.
That's a big word. One word. I can't do one. You've read my books. Like, you know, I can't say anything in just one word.
Just one word, though. I know that's the fun of it, though. You gotta limit it to the one word.
Why is that hard? Entertaining, I guess.
Entertaining.
I don't know. And that's not even like an ego thing. It's just my shit's silly. It's funny. It's unfortunate. It's all of those things, I guess. But again, I'm going into a list of words, not just one. So.
What is your measure of success as a poet?
I don't know. I think if you are able to write one word on a piece of paper and grow from it, you've succeeded.
So it's not published, anything like that?
No, I mean, those are things that I have explored and made happen for the simple fact that it just needs to be documented. It needs to be left behind as a piece of history for people to have at their fingertips. But no, I don't know that that equals success necessarily. I mean, plenty of people that have been published that I'm like, why? Why did this make it? I mean, how did that font get past a graphic designer? Like, there's been many things that's not a key to success or a note to success. If you're able to. If you set out to tell a story and you get it out of your head and you put it on a piece of paper and it lives in the world as your truth, as your story, that's success. I mean, that's what makes you a writer. You know, it's not about the award. I've never won an award. I've never, you know, my poetry's not award winning. It's not, I mean, none of that really equals success. Those are all things that you can aim for and that you can, you know, try to achieve as a writer, but that doesn't equal success for you.
Yeah.
You know.
And I didn't want to I was going to save it for the next one, but it's going to kill me not knowing. I was talking about your work to a friend today, and I told him about Baker Man. And I said it stands out because out of all his poems, it's the shortest. It's 7 lines, and it was very mysterious. And I was like, so I have to ask, what's the deal with Baker Man? What is that about?
What's really funny is that I now am friends with that person as an adult, like way past like
that stage
of feeling about and when you said that to me, I can't remember whether or not I told him about it. I don't remember, and I don't think he has a copy of my book. but his last name was Baker. And there is a Tori Amos song called Baker, I think is what it's called. And I had this really interesting connection to him, and oh my god, I love this man. I loved him, and he was the first adult that I was ever in a relationship with that was fun and silly and stupid and then when I realized that he wasn't being completely honest with me, the place that I went to was anger. It was complete and total anger. And in a way that I now, looking back, he didn't necessarily deserve, because I wasn't 100% honest either. This was back when I believed in monogamy as a successful model for relationships. That is a giant piece of chocolate cake, and I'm about to knock him down. I ran into him at Pride, and he had gained a tremendous amount of weight, later finding out that it was because he had quit smoking. And that just tends to happen. And that was one of those little digs that was completely out of character, that was completely petty, and it ended up being funny as it read in just this short little blurb. There's another poem that kind of ends abruptly, and I kept it because it was the one about the guy that I had built up in my head over the course of the evening, and then he came before I even took my pants off. So there's certain pieces that really that ended abruptly that way, just to be silly and to be, because I do like comedy. Comedy is a big part of my life. So I kept it. I kept that in there, and what I find really interesting is that I quite enjoy him as an adult, and was always one of the people that I don't know if you've ever done this, but a part of me always wished that he knew me as an adult, because I was really young when I was with him, and I was very needy, and I needed a lot from him, and a lot more than he was able to give, regardless of whether or not he wanted to. And I always knew that he would really love me as a person who I was 10 years later. And we struck up a conversation online. We finally reconnected. He's a foodie now. He always has been, but now he's really into it. He has a partner. The last time I saw him, he came to see me as Polonius in this cutting of Macbeth called Method of Madness that I was in. And I know he is present. He follows what I do online, and part of me wonders if he knows. I can't for the life of me remember if he has a copy of my book, or if he's made the connection that that's him. I don't know. He would laugh at it. I know he has a tremendous sense of humor. A part of me feels like I need to tell him, but
you should read what I wrote back in my more angsty days.
Exactly. It's only 7 lines.
It was fun. Yeah, I was so short that I was like, it was so mysterious too, because I could read it in both ways, where it could be dark, like somebody that really did hurt you, and then it could have been very funny. So I was like, I gotta know. I gotta know what this damn poem is about, because out of all the long ones, all of them are pretty much, they tell a lot of stories.
Yeah. Then it's funny because the story is quite dramatic. I mean, I actually caught him physically cheating on me. And so, and I mean, not necessarily in the act, it was actually after the act. But he was a big political activist, and so the back of his car was covered in stickers, bumper stickers. It was noticeable, when you knew that was his car. And in this fucking weird touched by an angel kind of moment, I was leaving my friend's house. I was on my way home. I don't know. I've never gone this way before. I don't know how I got distracted and ended up on the street that I don't normally drive on to get home. And as I turn and I'm driving, the car catches my attention, and it's parked at this business. and it's very visibly his car.
Yeah.
He hadn't been returning my phone calls. We were supposed to actually meet up an hour from then. And I'm like, what is this? I don't even know where he would be. And it was a bathhouse.
Wow.
So when I actually recognized the name, and I knew it was a bathhouse, I went in, I paid however much it was to get a locker, and I just went on a manhunt. Like, I was like, I was gonna find this motherfucker. And I turned a corner, and he was already at a locker, like putting his clothes back on. Like, he was getting ready to leave. And he looked at me, and the first thing that came out of his mouth was, "What are you doing here?" And I'm like, "What am I doing here?" It was so dramatic, and it totally fueled like that dramatic side of myself. And I guess I'd always wanted to know what this, situation was like. And my first thing that came out of his mouth was like, "Oh, I'm just checking things out. Apparently, this is a fun place to be, so I'm gonna take a walk around." And he's like, "You don't need to be here. You're better than this." And I was like, "Well, you're here, so obviously there's something to be done. So I'm just gonna take a look around. I'll meet you back at your apartment later." And he's just like, "No, just come with me. Let's talk it out." And then we did, and he just never had the courage to tell me that he was wanting bigger and different, and not necessarily better, but just different. And we broke up, and then I became really angry.
And then turned it into 7. Why just 7 lines though? That's all you got?
That's all that came out.
Just one of those spiteful.
And then I'm glad you got that. I mean, that was it. I mean,
I like how it turned out that way in real life as well.
Yeah.
I wished it happened.
And now he's a foodie.
Curse complete.
He's not gonna lose weight.
Well, that's it for these.